Support for the Legislative Gazette comes from New York State United Teachers, working to support students, educators, and public schools as the center of their communities through the Public Schools Unite Us initiative, and United University Professions, representing 37,000 academic and professional employees at SUNY campuses and teaching hospitals across New York State. Frederick E. Cole, President, uupinfo.org. Governor Kathy Hochul and New York State lawmakers conceded this week that there's no chance they'll meet the state budget deadline, which is the day after Easter. But they say they intend to come back next week and try to reach an agreement on a spending plan. The Legislative Gazette's Karen DeWitt reports.
Senate Budget Bill, Senate Print 8302, enacts to make appropriations for the legal requirements of the state debt service.
The legislature approved one budget bill to authorize the state to continue paying its debts. They then adjourned until next Tuesday, April 2nd, one day after the budget is due. They left the rest of the spending plan, including how to distribute school aid, pay for ever-increasing costs for health care, and an affordable housing program, for later. On the Senate floor, Finance Committee Chair Liz Krueger, speaking on Thursday, says with Good Friday and Easter Sunday approaching, there was not enough time left to vote on everything.
We are working hard to reach agreement on billions of dollars of spending and revenue that, since we are planning to go home today with Good Friday tomorrow and Easter on Sunday, it is not realistic that we will get a complete budget done by April 1st.
Senate Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins told reporters that while discussions continue, there is still no agreement on the major issues.
We're in the middle of the middle, so yes.
Sticking points include Governor Hochul's proposal to alter school aid distribution and end what's known as hold harmless. That guarantees that all school districts do not receive less aid than they did the previous year. The Senate and Assembly oppose that plan. They want to instead have the state education department conduct a study to change the state's foundation aid formula at a future time. They say the sudden cuts would be too disruptive to schools. Lawmakers also want to restore Hochul's cuts to the Medicaid budget, including to home health care programs. Senator Stewart-Cousins says lawmakers want to seek a federal waiver, similar to one granted to California. It could yield $4 billion over the next 3 years and avoid cuts. She says the affordability of health care is a national crisis, and the temporary waiver would help plug gaps until a long-term solution is reached.
It's not easy, it's not within reach, and that's why these creative solutions, are what we use as part of the strategy to make sure that New Yorkers have access to quality, affordable care.
The governor and legislature have also not yet worked out an affordable housing plan. It could include a new tax credit for developers and stronger tenant protections. And they have yet to agree on a plan to crack down on retail theft. Hochul and lawmakers had raised the possibility of a conceptual agreement on the budget before breaking for the holiday, but the hope was fading, says Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie.
I can't predict a handshake deal. I guess I use the analogy that when the governor does a budget and resolutions that we're in the same galaxy. I think where the budget negotiations are now, I feel like we're on the same planet. I don't know if we're in the same country, in the same state yet, but we're at least on the same planet.
Lawmakers, before they adjourned for the long weekend, approved an extender bill sent by the governor. It will keep government running and pay state workers through Thursday, April 4th. Hochul, in a statement, says she believes a final budget agreement is within reach. Last year, the budget was more than 1 month late. In Albany, I'm Karen DeWitt for the New York Public News Network.
2 New York State lawmakers are promoting legislation they say will support local farms and address the affordable housing crisis. The Legislative Gazette's Alexander Babby explains.
At the Capitol Thursday, State Senator Jim Tedisco said a 20% tax credit would be implemented by the measure and used to build housing for farm workers, a step meant to prevent more farms from going under.
Between 2017 and 2022, New York lost 28,000 family farms, the steepest decline in the past 3 decades. New York also lost 364 acres of farmland over the last 5 years.
The Republican from the 44th District says the measure will also help house homeless individuals.
They're part of the housing problem. They need to find affordable housing. If this gets into place and passes, and I think it's a no-brainer, it's just common sense, they're going to say to themselves, well, I thought about working on a farm. Wait a second. They're going to provide affordable housing for me? I'm going to sign up. I want to work for the farm. I need housing.
Jeff Williams is Director of Public Policy for the New York Farm Bureau. He related the legislation to an existing 20% investment tax rebate for farmers.
You can house chickens in a barn and get 20% back, but you can't house employees in high-quality housing under this tax credit. This bill fixes that issue once and for all.
The measure is sponsored in the Assembly by Democrat Marianne Boutenschan, whose 119th district includes many farms in the Utica-Rome region.
In my area, I have Donito Farms, the Candelas. Each one of them have brought this issue as we do a farm tour annually to my colleagues in the Assembly, is that housing is very concerning. From the employees' perspective, they bring their families with them. Their families love the communities. They love to be a part of rural America in regards to the farming industry, and they want to make sure their families are close in safe housing.
Williams says the state needs as many farm workers as it can get.
Best case scenario is a lot, right? Because we want farms to grow and more farms to start. That means more farm workers, means more investment on farms, means more housing. And so I think the sky's the limit when it comes to that kind of paradigm.
The bill is being considered by the Senate Budget and Revenue Committee. For the Legislative Gazette, I'm Alexander Babby.
You are listening to the Legislative Gazette, a program about New York State government and politics. I'm David Guistina. This week, I sat down with Krista Hesdorfer, Director of Public Affairs for Hunger Solutions New York. We began our conversation by talking about their push to pass the final piece of legislation that would provide free meals to public school students in need.
So the Healthy School Meals for All New York Kids campaign is a group of more than 290 organizations advocating for New York State to provide school breakfast and lunch at no cost to all students across the state. We at Hunger Solutions New York are proud to co-lead that campaign with our colleagues at Community Food Advocates, and we've been really encouraged by the overwhelming support of so many partners across the state, from the teachers union to the PTAs to healthcare advocates. Even New York Farm Bureau is signed on. So it's been really incredible to see these diverse voices coalesce around one common sense policy that has widespread benefits across all of these different sectors and in every corner of the state. We are on our second year of advocating together for universal school meals in New York, and last year we made significant progress. Last year's state budget included $134.6 million for an expansion of free school meals. That funding allowed more than 1,200 more schools to offer free meals to all of their students starting this school year. So some listeners may have seen their local school or a neighboring district announce that this year they're able to provide meals for all of their students at no cost. That's a direct result of that state funding. So we're at a point now where more than 80% of New York students have access to free school meals, which is pretty incredible. But there is still this gap. And as always in New York, a seemingly small percentage is actually a huge number of kids. There are about 320,000 students who still don't have access to a universal school meal program. So we are back at the table this year. We think that New York can and absolutely should do this. 8 other states have already established a universal school meal program for their kids, including our neighbors in Massachusetts and Vermont. So we're urging Governor Hochul and our legislative leaders to close that remaining gap in this year's budget.
And just for context, that remaining gap is largely on Long Island and in the Capital Region, Hudson Valley, and in Western New York. So most of it upstate. But the key question remains. We're having a negotiation right now. The governor on Wednesday this week indicated she's going to extend the deadline till April 4th. We've got a holiday weekend coming up. You know, a lot of the decisions in my observation over the years have already been made, but you, as you've told me before we came on, did not see this final gap funding in the executive budget, so you're trying to make a last push here.
That's exactly right. We have incredibly strong support in the legislature. We were very grateful that both the state Senate and Assembly fully funded a universal school meals program in their one House budget proposals. But we didn't see this in the executive budget this year. We saw that the governor included sustained funding for the expansion last year, which is incredibly important, and we really appreciated her continuing that program. But it didn't go any further to close that remaining gap. That certainly doesn't mean that she can't or won't support this as they go into final budget negotiations. And we really hope that she will champion this. She's been very mindful of the affordability crisis in New York State. And this policy is an opportunity for her to say to families, here's one less bill to pay. You can spend a little bit less at the grocery store. It's really meaningful, direct financial relief that families can see in their day-to-day budget. So we're hopeful that the governor and legislative leaders will be able to work together on this and get it across the finish line.
It's interesting to me that this issue of school meals kind of crosses the two biggest places in the budget where we fund healthcare and education. And I can hear the counter arguments. I can hear listeners saying, we pay too much for education already. Why should we be paying for meals for students? And how do you answer people who are on the other side of this argument?
There's a real misperception that last year's funding, that the expansion of free school meals covered all the kids across the state who, quote unquote, need this. And everyone else is doing just fine. The schools that were left behind are serving wealthy communities who don't need any additional assistance from the state. And the reality, of course, is much more complicated than that. We see food insecurity in every school community across the state. We looked at the schools that are left behind that still don't have a universal school meal program. And across those schools, 1 in 5 students are considered economically disadvantaged. That doesn't even count the families who are just above the income guidelines for assistance programs like free school meals, like SNAP or Medicaid, these various means-tested programs that we often look to as an indicator of need. There are many families across New York State who don't qualify for those programs, but they're really struggling to make ends meet.
That's Krista Hestorfer, Director of Public Affairs for Hunger Solutions, New York. You are listening to the Legislative Gazette, a program about New York State government and politics. I'm David Guistina. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency is preparing to release a third review of General Electric's removal of harmful PCBs from the Hudson River. Ahead of the report, a bipartisan coalition of New York State lawmakers and environmental advocates are demanding the EPA deem the cleanup incomplete. The Legislative Gazette's Lucas Willard reports.
The EPA is preparing to release its third 5-year review on the Hudson River Superfund cleanup in the coming weeks. The review will focus on the upper Hudson River, a 40-mile section between Fort Edward and Troy, where General Electric was ordered to remove toxic PCBs from the waterway. Dredging was completed in 2015. But advocates up and down the Hudson River want the agency to deem the cleanup not yet protective. Former U.S. EPA Region 2 Administrator Pete Lopez, now Executive Director of Policy, Advocacy, and Science at environmental organization Scenic Hudson, was working at the EPA when it issued a certificate of completion for the remedial action for GE's cleanup in 2019. But at the time, the EPA also deferred a determination on the protectiveness of the remedy for human and environmental health until more data is collected. Lopez explained why the agency did not close the books on the Hudson River at a press conference at the New York State Capitol Wednesday.
Due to the advocacy of everyone here, more information was brought to bear. DEC and others, many of our colleagues here, brought new information to the table that forced EPA to blink. The career staff who thought they had it in the bag, thought they had it under control, realized that the remedy was not acting as it should. It was not protective. So they paused and said the remedy is not yet protective.
Lopez is asking EPA Administrator Michael Regan and his Region 2 successor Lisa Garcia to follow suit.
To me, it's a badge of honor. Take a break. It's not protective. Pause and see what else can be done to remove PCBs.
Advocates say sampling data from fish and sediment shows PCB concentrations are higher than models forecast. Hudson Valley State Senator Pete Harcum is a Democrat who chairs the Environmental Conservation Committee.
It's a stain on the environmental movement. It's a stain on public health. And when they were required to clean it up, we had the expectation that they would clean it up.
As part of the third five-year review, the EPA is reviewing samples taken from 2017 through 2021. Last year, the EPA began working with GE to conduct new sampling in the lower Hudson. Advocates want a full remedial investigation feasibility study of the Hudson below the Troy Dam. State Senator Rob Rollison, a Republican who previously served as mayor of Poughkeepsie, said after decades of calls for a cleaner Hudson, not enough progress has been made.
My dad got here in 1967 in the New York State Senate. The very first committee he was on was called Commerce and Navigation. And it had the Hudson River in its jurisdiction. And for many of you who might remember what the Hudson River looked like in 1967, it doesn't look that way today because they started for the very first time holding corporations and municipalities responsible for just dumping into the Hudson.
Democrat Pat Fahey, whose state assembly district includes the city of Albany, said the Hudson River must be a priority as local leaders work to reconnect New York's capital city with its riverfront. Fahey has advocated for the teardown of elevated Interstate 787 in Albany.
But while we reclaim access to the riverfront, we need that riverfront and we need the river clean.
General Electric released a statement following the press conference that reads, quote, hailed as a historic achievement by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, GE's Hudson River dredging project removed the vast majority of PCBs in the upper river and led to broad declines in PCB levels. Data collected by New York State following the completion of dredging showed that more than 99% of sediment samples in the upper Hudson were below EPA's dredging criteria, end quote. As it prepares its review for release, EPA says it is incorporating feedback from its 5-year review team, which includes agency technical experts, representatives from state and federal support agencies, and the Hudson River Superfund's Community Advisory Group. EPA will collect public comment on the report.
For the Legislative Gazette, I'm Lucas Willard.
With the Supreme Court debating the future of abortion medication, New York Congressman Paul Tonko gathered local medical professionals and advocates for protecting reproductive health care at a roundtable discussion this week. The Legislative Gazette's Samantha Simmons was there and filed this report.
I think a lot of people don't even know about things until 20 weeks.
The Democrat from the 20th District met with 5 advocates at his Albany office to discuss the ongoing attacks on reproductive freedom across the nation. It comes as the Supreme Court heard arguments in its first abortion case since conservative justices overturned the constitutional right to an abortion 2 years ago. In the current case, the mail delivery of mifepristone could be halted. A decision is expected in June. Tonko supports abortion as health care, saying preserving access to abortion medications gives people a safe and effective treatment to terminate pregnancy for a variety of reasons.
Bans on abortion hurt real people, especially those in marginalized communities.
Corinne McLeod is the upstate medical director for Planned Parenthood of Greater New York and an OBGYN. McLeod says state bans in place around the country are proving to be disastrous, exacerbating a shortage of medical providers.
I'm from Texas, and I very, very consciously chose not to train in Texas and not to return to Texas because I can't do my job. I would go to jail. Even though my family's there. And I care very deeply about those communities, but I can't imagine going back to a place where I could be prosecuted for providing the best and most comprehensive medical care that there is.
Abortion doula Tammy Stewart says the medication allows pregnant people to make a choice that fits their current situation. The Planned Parenthood volunteer says reasons to terminate a pregnancy are multi-pronged.
We need to be talking about the living wage, the child care gap. We need to be telling our people that, yes, we should be building our villages, but the village is no longer free.
Recently, France became the only country in the world to amend its constitution to preserve a woman's choice to receive an abortion. Shelley Hegan, the president and CEO of Upper Hudson Planned Parenthood, says America should follow suit. First, New Yorkers will consider a constitutional amendment on the fall ballot.
We hope to pass the Equal Rights Amendment to protect abortion access in New York in perpetuity, and it seems outrageous to say, but there should be a constitutional amendment allowing for access to abortion, or somehow limiting the role government plays in medication or in healthcare.
For their part, abortion opponents have cheered the Dobbs decision, and with states setting their own rules, envisioned a future congressional vote on a nationwide ban. Lori Keogh is an abortion opponent with New York State Right to Life. She says if the Supreme Court rules to ban the mailing of mifepristone, it's not limiting access. It's protecting the health and safety of women.
We're not checking her, so we're not checking her in person to make sure that this drug is safe at this particular point in her pregnancy so that we can confirm the time of her pregnancy. We're not seeing her and going through and counseling her and then not having anyone in person with her.
Tonko says this divided Congress has been a difficult one to get progressive policies through. Earlier this week, Governor Kathy Hochul, a Democrat, said she is continuing her commitment to provide access to mifepristone, which is made by New York-based Danco Laboratories.
It's one thing to provide abortion services, but if they outlaw the distribution of mifepristone as a result of the Supreme Court decision, which we'll hear about in June, if they go that far, then what options do I have? I have 150,000 doses stockpiled, but it should not come to this.
For the Legislative Gazette, I'm Samantha Simmons.
You are listening to the Legislative Gazette, a program about New York State government and politics. I'm David Gostina. The State University of New York is expanding a free program aimed at growing the state's workforce of direct support professionals. The Legislative Gazette's Jesse King reports.
Direct support professionals, or DSPs, are trained to care for and assist people with developmental disabilities. The New York Office for People with Developmental Disabilities partnered with SUNY last year to bring a free micro-credential program to select campuses across the state. Governor Kathy Hochul recently announced a $32 million investment to expand the program to 6 additional campuses. Dutchess Community College in Poughkeepsie celebrated the news with a recognition ceremony for its first cohort of DSP students.
Please rise.
DCC President Peter Grant Jordan says 15 students participated in the program last fall, and more than 170 are taking DSP courses this semester. The 3-tiered program allows students to earn up to 3 certifications from the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals. For each tier they complete, students get a $750 bonus. OPWDD Commissioner Carrie Neifeld estimates the program's expansion will educate roughly 6,000 current and future DSPs by 2030. She hopes it will help New York not only grow its workforce, but retain and upskill employees.
People like to know they're going to be supported by their employer to excel at their job, to feel confident in their ability to do their job. And so an opportunity to do a credentialing program like this helps people to know that they're going to be supported in that way.
That was the case for Ellen Mayer, who made the switch to being a DSP at age 57 in 2016 after working for more than 20 years as a paralegal. Mayer got some initial training through the Arc of Orange County and worked in the field for years before earning her DSP certificate at DCC. She says she became a DSP because she was hoping to connect with people after the deaths of her husband and father.
I was looking for people to care for, to be honest, instead of being a paralegal. And I attended an open house at ARC, and I fell in love with the program. It's so much more than just taking care of people's physical needs. Some of them are nonverbal. Some of them have behaviors. It's reaching beyond that to touch the human being underneath.
The micro-credential does not equal a college degree, but the up to 27 academic credits students earn can be put toward an associate's, bachelor's, or master's degree down the line. That was part of the appeal for Florence Ayuko, who enrolled in the program after moving to the U.S. from Kenya. Ayuko says she initially wanted to be a teacher, but her training in Kenya did not certify her to teach in New York. She did have experience working with special education students, though, and thought being a DSP could be a good step forward. She says the DCC classes ended up opening her eyes to a range of career possibilities, from nursing and psychology to social work.
I'm on DSP2 now. Tomorrow, because of this program, I have been able to manage that I can go to school and do well. I'm starting my master's program.
For you.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I will be having my first class tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
In master's in social work, Grand Canyon University in Arizona. So I'll be doing it online.
Okay.
So I appreciate this program. They have given me the ability to know that I can go to school and do well.
And you
after
will
10
do well.
years.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
DCC President Jordan and SUNY Chancellor John King both hope the program will do for other students exactly what it did for Ayuko and encourage them to continue their education. King says SUNY saw an enrollment increase across the system for the first time in a decade last fall. The system currently offers more than 600 microcredentials, and King hopes to add more to the lineup.
Folks who are currently working, students can take these micro-credentials and put them immediately to use with employer partners, which is fantastic. And we want to continue to grow that effort.
The program's expansion will bring the micro-credential to SUNY Oneonta, Orange County Community College, North Country Community College, Farmingdale State College, Jamestown Community College, and SUNY Canton. King expects the program to launch at these campuses next fall. For the Legislative Gazette, I'm Jessie King.
And that about does it for this week's show. The Legislative Gazette is a production of WAMC Northeast Public Radio. We had help from the New York State Public News Network. You can listen to the Legislative Gazette anytime at WAMCpodcast.org. Look for program number 2413. And join us again next week at this same time for more news on New York State government and politics. For the Legislative Gazette, I'm David Gustina. Support for the Legislative Gazette comes from United University Professions, representing 37,000 academic and professional employees at SUNY campuses and teaching hospitals across New York State. Frederick E. Cole, President. UUPinfo.org.